When night falls, the darkness starts to speak. Between each breath and the silence, there are whispers no one was meant to hear. This is Night Whispers, where the dark has a story to tell. I used to live in a small studio apartment in Chicago, right after finishing college. It wasn't fancy at all, just one single room on the top floor of a 3-story building. I chose it simply because the rent was cheap and the location made it easy to get to work. At 23, juggling student loans and barely any savings, I didn't have many options, so that little space quickly became my home. The apartment was small, but clean, and most importantly, it was mine. The only window looked down into a narrow alley between my building and the one directly across. The alley barely let in any light during the day and turned completely pitch black at night. At the time, I worked late shifts, bartending, usually coming home around 2:30 or 3 a.m., eating something quick, scrolling through my phone, and passing out soon after. About a month after moving in, I noticed something strange. One night, right after switching on the overhead light, I thought I saw the curtain in the window across the alley twitch slightly, just a small flicker like someone bumped it. I froze, staring, but the window remained dark and still. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe I startled someone inside, or maybe I imagined it after a long shift. The next night, it happened again. As soon as the lights in my room came on, the curtain across the alley shifted. This time I was certain I saw a hand pulling the fabric aside before letting it fall back. The apartment on the other side stayed completely dark, no lights, no movement except that slight parting of the curtain. That unsettled me the most because I had never seen that unit lit up even once. Over the following week, I began paying closer attention. Every night without fail, the curtain would move within seconds of me turning on my lights. Subtle but unmistakable. If I kept the lights off and sat quietly by the window, nothing happened. But the moment even a dim lamp flicked on the curtain would shift again. It became obvious that someone was watching me from the other apartment, no coincidence at all. I tried to explain it away, maybe someone just liked looking out at night, but the timing lined up too perfectly with my arrival. I eventually asked my landlord about the unit across the alley, and he casually told me it had been vacant for months. He even laughed, suggesting I was simply paranoid. I briefly considered calling the police, but felt ridiculous reporting movement in a supposedly empty apartment. Then, things escalated. One night I came home later than usual, around 4 in the morning, exhausted from cleaning up after a private event at the bar. When I reached my door, I noticed something wedged in the frame. At first I thought it was a flyer or junk mail, but when I pulled it out I realized it was a crumpled note with one single word written in pen, "Hey." My legs nearly went out from under me. Panicking, I immediately ran to the window to check the apartment across the alley. The curtain was fully drawn, completely still. That made it worse somehow. I called my friend Jamie, barely able to steady my voice. She urged me to pack a few things and come stay at her place immediately. I grabbed a backpack, threw in what I needed, and left the apartment without looking back. The next morning, I confronted my landlord again and demanded he unlock the apartment across the alley. He seemed reluctant, but eventually agreed. The place was dusty, silent, and completely bare. The walls were peeling and the floor creaked with every step as though the entire unit had been abandoned for decades. Everything seemed lifeless until we reached the room facing my window. There, positioned directly in front of the window, was a single metal folding chair. It was the only object in the entire apartment. Just one chair arranged to face my unit perfectly, as though someone sat there night after night watching me from the darkness. The sight of it made my skin crawl. It confirmed everything I had feared but hoped wasn't true. The police were called and searched the place thoroughly. I think they took fingerprints, but nothing ever came of it. No signs of forced entry, no explanation for how someone got in or out. What haunted me most was the realization that I had been right the entire time. Someone had been watching me intentionally, quietly, and for who knows how long. That thought alone made me feel sick. I moved out that same week. The idea that a stranger had been observing me from only a few feet away across the alley made it impossible to stay. Those last few nights I barely slept. Every creak or flicker of light made me jump. I avoided turning on the lights, avoided the window, and kept imagining eyes staring back at me from behind a curtain. At one point I wondered if the landlord could have been the person watching me, but I eventually let the thought go. If it had been him, he would have removed the chair before showing me the apartment. The fact that he didn't only made the situation more bizarre and unsettling, Whoever the watcher was, it had to be someone else with access to a place no one was supposed to be in. Even after moving, the fear never fully left me. Some nights I would wake suddenly with the same overwhelming sense of being observed. The memory of that shifting curtain haunted me, creeping back into my mind no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. The idea that someone silently studied my nightly routine from just across the alley was something I couldn't shake easily. The experience left a lingering paranoia that followed me to new places. Anytime I stood near a window, I found myself glancing toward neighboring buildings, watching for even the slightest movement of a curtain. The image of the metal chair sitting alone in an empty apartment became burned into my thoughts, reminding me that danger sometimes hides in the quietest shadows. Some nights I still catch myself imagining a figure standing in a dark window across from mine. Whether someone truly is watching or whether it's simply a part of the fear that never went away, I honestly don't know. But the feeling remains, an uneasy sense that someone somewhere might still be looking in my direction. When I was 12, my family moved to a remote part of rural Oregon surrounded by nothing but endless pine forest and quiet dirt roads. The house was old, built in the 1942, with creaking floors, a dusty attic, and a weather-beaten shed sitting a short distance from the back door. Even on the first day, something about that place unsettled me, as if the silence hid something waiting just outside the light. The shed was packed with rusted tools and forgotten belongings from the previous owner. My dad always said he would clean it out, but he never actually did. We usually stayed away from it. I still remember the first night I felt something was wrong. Around midnight, while I hid under my blanket reading with a flashlight, our golden retriever Max started barking furiously toward the shed. His barking wasn't normal, it was fear. I crept to the window and peeked outside. Max stood rigid, staring into the darkness near the shed. The motion sensor light flicked on, stretching long, eerie shadows across the yard. I didn't see anyone, yet Max wouldn't stop. The next morning, my dad found deep boot prints in the dirt, leading straight from the house toward the shed. He brushed it off as a passerby, but something in my gut told me it wasn't that simple. Over the following weeks, Max kept barking late at night, always toward the shed. Every time we looked outside, nothing was there, but the footprints kept reappearing, always going toward the shed, never away. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps on the gravel beneath my window. Slow, dragging steps. I froze in bed, listening as the footsteps moved steadily toward the shed. I edged the blinds open just as the motion light switched on. For a brief, chilling moment, I saw a tall man standing beside the shed door. He wore a dirty gray coat and his face was hidden in shadow. Then the light clicked off, leaving the yard in darkness again. My breath caught. I tore away from the window and woke my parents. Dad grabbed his rifle and ran outside, but the man was gone. Dad checked the shed himself that night, unlocking it and shining a light around the inside. Nothing had changed, just old tools, dust, and the same cold smell. He added a new lock and reinforced the doors, insisting it would be fine. Things were calm for a while. Then Max disappeared. One morning, he was simply gone. We searched the woods, the road, and every nearby property, but he never came back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the shed, about the footprints, about the man I'd seen. Around 3 a.m., the back door creaked softly. I stepped into the hallway and found Dad already awake with his rifle in hand. As we looked out the window together, the motion light flicked on, and there he was again, standing beside the shed, holding a knife in one hand and Max's collar in the other. The sight hollowed me out instantly, like every drop of warmth drained from my body. Dad shouted and raised the rifle, but the man bolted into the woods. We called the police, who arrived quickly and searched the property. They didn't find him, but what they found in the shed was worse. The dirt floor had been cleared and carved with crude, disturbing symbols, as if someone had been performing some ritual there in secret. In the corner lay a pile of bones, animal bones, the officers claimed, though I wasn't sure I believed them. Behind a false wall panel, they discovered a backpack filled with items that didn't belong to us: wallets, old watches, scraps of clothing, things that must have belonged to other people, many other people. The most unsettling object was a notebook stuffed in the bag, covered in strange drawings. The notebook was filled with jagged handwriting, bizarre symbols, sketches of houses, families, and dozens of staring eyes. It felt like a warning, a message to let us know he had been watching us, just like he had watched the others. The police collected everything. My parents didn't hesitate. We started packing that night, desperate to leave the house behind before anything else happened. As I was gathering my things, I looked out my window one last time. The shed stood silent, with police tape fluttering in the breeze, but beyond it, at the edge of the tree line, I saw a pale face staring back at the house. It vanished the moment I blinked. Terror shot through me. I screamed for my dad, unable to form any other words. Dad ran into my room and rushed to the window. I pointed toward the trees, shaking. His expression changed instantly, rage and helplessness colliding in his eyes. He grabbed his rifle and stormed outside, yelling into the night and firing warning shots. I had never seen him lose control like that, but being forced out of our own home by someone dangerous enough to kill our dog was a breaking point. We moved out only a few days later, leaving the property behind for a safer area with actual neighbors and lights on the road. Even after we left, the sense of being watched took months to fade. Every creak, every distant bark, every nighttime sound brought the memory rushing back. Sometimes I wondered if he had followed us or if he simply waited for another isolated family. Even now, years later, the sound of a dog barking in the dark or footsteps on gravel can send chills down my spine. I still think about the belongings found in that backpack. Whose were they? What had happened to them? No one ever gave us answers. But one thing is certain, we were unbelievably lucky to leave when we did. If we had stayed longer, I doubt this story would have an ending at all. The strange symbols, the notebook, the face in the trees, they convinced me that the man wasn't just wandering around. He lived there somewhere close, watching and waiting. The shed was his hiding place, his shrine, and maybe a record of things he had done. The thought still makes my skin crawl whenever I remember those silent woods pressing in around our home. Many years have passed, yet the memory refuses to fade. That experience taught me that isolation is not always peaceful. Sometimes it is exactly what allows something dangerous to thrive unseen. And whenever I picture that motion light flickering on, revealing a silent figure beside the shed, I feel grateful my family escaped in time. Because if we hadn't left when we did, I don't know if any of us would still be here to tell the story. In the summer of 2018, my friends and I, Abby Marcus, his younger brother Tim, Tim's girlfriend Hannah, and me, planned a weekend camping trip deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. We were all in our early 20s, freshly out of college, hoping to disconnect from everything for a few days. We picked a remote spot miles into the national park, surrounded by towering pines, damp earth, and complete silence. It felt like the perfect escape. The first night was peaceful. We hiked in with our gear, found a small clearing beside a quiet lake, and pitched 3 tents. After setting up camp, we cooked hot dogs and marshmallows over the fire, told stories, and stayed up late beneath a sky crowded with stars. The forest felt calm and harmless. None of us expected that the following night would be so drastically different. It started subtly. Around 11 p.m., on the second night, we were still sitting around the fire laughing when Marcus suddenly stopped mid-sentence and stared into the trees. He said he saw someone or something duck behind a trunk about 40 yards away. The rest of us looked, but saw nothing. Tim shrugged it off as a deer, but 20 minutes later, a loud stick snapped from the same direction. Abby looked genuinely frightened and said she wanted to go to bed. We agreed to call it a night. We doused the fire, zipped ourselves into the tents, and tried to sleep. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to heavy breathing right outside my tent. It was so close I could hear each strained inhale like someone older or out of shape. I froze, unsure if I was dreaming or awake. I listened for a stream of water, assuming one of my friends had stepped out to pee, but there was only the slow, labored breathing. I reached for my flashlight, but was too terrified to turn it on. The breathing moved from one side of the tent to the other, then stopped abruptly. I lay there for a long time waiting, eventually convincing myself it must have been one of my friends before drifting back to sleep. The next morning, no one mentioned anything at first, but when we gathered for breakfast, Marcus looked uneasy and finally admitted someone had walked around his tent the night before. Hannah nodded and said she heard it too, and that it sounded like more than one person. I asked everyone directly if anyone had gotten up during the night. Tim said he had, but he also thought he saw someone crouching near the fire pit around 4 a.m. We searched the campsite and found footprints circling all 3 tents. In a patch of wet soil, one footprint was unmistakably from a bare human foot, no boots, no sandals. The tracks led deeper into the woods and vanished. We tried to laugh it off, suggesting a prankster or strange hiker, but the tension made it clear none of us believed that. The forest felt heavier that day. That night we built a much larger fire and kept our flashlights close. No one wanted to sleep early. Around 2 a.m., we heard leaves crunching in the darkness, followed by a low, mumbling voice. Marcus whipped on his flashlight, and for a split second we saw a naked man crouched behind a nearby tree. He scurried away like an animal the moment the light hit him. We were left speechless. None of us dared go to our separate tents after that. We huddled near the fire sticks and flashlights in hand, trying to stay awake. Hannah whispered that maybe we should pack up and leave immediately, but Marcus and I argued against it. Navigating the dense woods at night with only a few headlamps and knowing someone was out there watching felt even more dangerous than staying put. That night was one of the longest of my life. I didn't sleep at all, just sat listening for every sound. Hours later, a sharp crack echoed in the distance. I whispered, "Please, let it be a deer." A few seconds passed before a voice floated through the trees. "I see you guys." It wasn't any of us. I waited for someone else to react, but the silence from my friends told me they were frozen with fear too. A moment later, my tent rustled slightly. I sat upright, staring at the zipper. It began to slide downward inch by inch. I screamed, and my friends started screaming as well. Whoever was outside took off, though I couldn't see them. I yanked the zipper up as fast as I could. For the rest of the night, I didn't hear footsteps or breathing again, but I never closed my eyes. As dawn finally approached, the forest grew lighter, and the tension eased just enough for us to pack up. We left as soon as the sun was fully up. The entire hike back to the car felt suffocating, like the woods were hiding eyes that followed us the whole way. None of us spoke much. All we wanted was to reach safety. At the ranger station, we reported everything. The ranger listened quietly and said our experience wasn't the first. There had been rumors, maybe one man, maybe multiple, living deep in the backcountry, stealing gear from campsites and possibly doing worse. He didn't elaborate, and none of us asked. The ride home was quiet, except for forced jokes we didn't really find funny. For weeks afterward, I couldn't shake the images from my mind: the naked figure, the whispering voice, the zipper sliding open. It made the woods feel less like a peaceful escape and more like a place where anything could be hiding just beyond sight. The experience left a mark that no amount of time truly erased. I began to understand that the quiet of the wilderness isn't always comforting. Sometimes it's the kind of quiet that hides movement, watches you, and waits. I kept replaying the moment Marcus's flashlight revealed that crouching figure, wondering how long he had been there before we noticed. The idea that he might have been watching us from the first night still chills me. I also wondered what drove that man or men to live out there far from everyone. Was he mentally unstable, dangerous, or simply wild after years alone? Whatever the answer, he got close. Close enough to circle our tents, close enough to breathe inches away, close enough to tug on the zipper with his bare hand. That was more than enough to change the way I view camping forever. Even now, whenever I hear the sound of a zipper or footsteps on dry leaves, I feel myself tense up. The memory of that night hasn't faded. We were lucky, far luckier than we realized at the time. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't woken up or screamed when I did. What I do know is that I haven't camped since, and I don't think I ever will again. Thank you for staying until the end. If the dark didn't scare you away, maybe you belong here. Subscribe to Night Whispers and let the darkness find you again next time.